I skipped lunch and all, but I didn't find anything so it's kind of did because I only had enough time to look at everything except for one company that is definitely not as related to us. I was a poster with a bunch of
this particular
literally like the armor, the same color, and like the same hair.
Because they are made class and you can drop off the cards.
How do you find out the stuff about
that's all on the website.
they're not too big. It's more.
Hey there, everybody.
Hello.
How's it going? Great. We're going to give it here just another minute, and then we'll get started. Everybody having a good show so far?
Woo! Yeah, you look happy.
Be happier, damn it. There we go.
Are you ready to be introduced to the advanced class guide?
Basically, we're just going to walk around and hit you all with the book.
It's osmosis. It'll all the information goes into your skull. It's really efficient.
If we hit hard Alright, just somebody back when you grab the doors and just pull them close so that we limit the noise of Wes's noisiness.
That evil campaign was like the worst. I was like, we are the only.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Introduction to the Advanced Class Guide seminar. In this seminar, we're going to be talking about this wonderful volume of the Adventure Path. I mean, we're going to be talking about what you'll find in this book. Quick show of hands, how many of you have already picked it up?
Oh, nice.
Why am I even bothering? Let's just have an hour to read. You've all got it already. Preaching to the converted here. Yes, you may. So we're just going to close our eyes for 45 minutes. You guys, if you just be quiet, that'd be great.
I mean, these people didn't sign an NDA. They could tell other people at Pfizer.
No, these are good people. I mean, look at it. They wouldn't tell, right?
I'm sorry, I'm awful good. I'm bound to tell.
I'm going to need you to turn in your books and leave this up.
Bring your books to the order of the rack. The candies outside.
Okay.
How much the other table cleric can I change his alignment?
Yeah, sure. Knock us about. All right. So what we're going to be doing is talking about what you're going to find in this book. Kind of give you an overview of what's inside. I'm going to wager many of you have not exactly had a chance to read it cover to cover as of yet. I don't know. Maybe you have.
Raise your hand if you've read it cover to cover already. Why are you here?
Now we're just confused. All right.
You're our TA.
Yeah, no, that's fine. He's auditing the course. We're going to go over what you're going to find in the book, then we'll just open it up for questions. We are just going to stick to this book. We have another seminar tomorrow at 4, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Where we're going to talk about a lot of the other books we have coming up in the near future. So if you got the time tomorrow, I suggest you come by for that and the Paizo 2014 and Beyond seminar, which is right before it. So the Advanced Class Guide, huh? Why did we do this again? Oh yeah, because classes are awesome.
Because classes are awesome.
Yeah. This book, the primary focus of this book was the genesis of the idea that kind of led to this book being made. really had to do with, it all started with the Magus. Like, back when we were doing Ultimate Magic, the Magus came about and we were like, oh, that was really cool. It worked out kind of, it did what we wanted it to do. It's a good blend of fighter and wizard. And we're sitting around thinking, it's like, well, if you wanted to play the fighter wizard before that, you had to take some levels of fighter, some levels of wizard, some levels of Eldritch Knight maybe. You had to make this kind of multi-class monster. And while it could work, it often left something to be desired. And we thought, well, there's probably a lot of class concepts that fit into that category, right? It's like, oh, I want to play the fighter cleric, right? I want to be a little bit more fightery than a cleric and a lot more spellcastery than just a straight fighter. In that you don't have any. But just taking levels in the two classes isn't really a very satisfying solution. You end up with kind of a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B, and you're not quite what you want to be. So when we came time to program out this book, we thought, okay, well, let's do that, and let's explore it to its fullest. So that's where the hybrid classes were born. We sat down and we brainstormed out a huge list, many of which are in the book. There were a few that got cut for space reasons. We decided to stop at 10 because really it was getting ridiculous. And we came up with a list of 10 classes that we felt were kind of good. They had a good niche. They were something that people could imagine. You say the name and you say War Priest and people go, oh yeah, I know what that is, right? It gives you a good idea of what it is. And then when it came time to actually build them, we took a little bit from one of its parent classes, a little bit from the other one, and then blended them together with some sort of new mechanic that made the class its own. Just going back to our fighter cleric example, right? He's got some of the things that a fighter has, right? He gets some bonus feats, he gets some abilities with weapons and things like that. He's got some of the things of a cleric. He's a 6th level caster. Well, that's primarily it. But in addition to that, we added Fervor, which is an ability that allows him to kind of blend the two together in an interesting way. Fervor allows him to heal himself quickly, but at the same time, he can also use it to, swift cast spells on himself, so he can buff himself very quickly. And once we started getting into those sorts of mechanics, the class finally started to click. Now, as many of you are probably aware, in the playtest it was full BAB class with its weapon. We changed that back. But there was a lot of changes that happened. How many of you participated in the playtest? Fair number. All right, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. You guys helped make this book. You really did. A lot of people seem to think that we just do these playtests for giggles, but really, our playtests really do help us make the book. So if you have the time, I would highly encourage you to help us playtest our books when we put up the documents. Not only do you get an early look at the material, but you also are able to help us influence the direction some of these things take. Your feedback is really invaluable. So, just going through the classes in here, I won't belabor it too much because, to be honest, you have the book now, so I don't need to spend a great deal of time talking about all of them. So, but I'll just go through them all briefly. There's the Arcanist. The Arcanist is a blend of sorcerer and wizard. Yeah, exactly. A lot of people. I actually got that look around the office too. Yeah, you gotta get yeah, a lot of people did. And they said, no, stick with me. I've got something crazy I want to do. And in that, he's a spontaneous caster, right? But unlike a sorcerer, he can prepare his spells each day. That said, he gets spells at a slower rate like a sorcerer, and gets less spells than a wizard, right? So he gets less spells than a sorcerer, but I got it all backwards now. Anyway, suffice to say, he gets some of the drawbacks of both, and some of the advantages of both kind of put together. And he also has an arcane reservoir, which allows him to kind of do magic tricks and kind of change the way he casts spells. We kind of see the Arcanist as kind of that spellcaster who is like, yeah, you go study your old books, and yeah, you get your power from your grandpa. That's all great. I'm going to learn how magic works fundamentally so I can learn how to rip it apart and put it back together. So he can consume his own spell slots to fuel his other abilities, and he can even consume magic items. He can just drain them of their power to siphon that into himself and use that to create greater effects. So that's kind of the Arcanist. There's the Blood Ranger. This is a blend of barbarian and sorcerer. Steve Moore should talk about the Blood Ranger there a little bit.
Yeah, so there was a couple of goals, right? I mean, we know sorcerers gain their power from bloodlines, and we know barbarians can do awesome things, and we had the idea, what if bloodlines changed the way you raged, right? You could turn bigger or draconic, or really infuse the magic into the rage, rather than I'm just the guy who's angry, right? This is the guy who's angry and has something living deep inside of him, and it needs to burst out, and he just beats the crap out of whatever he sees. And then, of course, we're like, that's really cool. And he should cast spells too, right? So this is imagine those old 70 metal albums, right? The Blood Ragers on every single one of them.
You'll find this being a recurring theme, actually, with these classes, that about half of these belong to be painted on the side of a van.
And so,
this guy'd probably be in the middle.
or in the back. Right?
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun to design. It was one of those classes as well where people are like, really, you're going to do this? Nobody's full base attack bonus, and then he casts spells as well. And he's got a much slower progression. We had to make a 4-level spontaneous progression that wasn't in the game. That was actually the easy part. It's like, oh yeah, you just kind of do this. And I knew that we were on the right track when one of our editors, Ryan Macklin, played it, and he just came back. He's like, I had the best time. I just totally hulked out and beat things, and it was great. And he's a big story gamer, right? Ryan's like, oh yeah, I like story and everything. He's like, my id just came out, which is actually really easy with Ryan, but in life, but not in games. And just loved the heck out of that class. And so I'm like, okay. And when it went out in playtest, we got some really good feedback on how to tweak the bloodlines and everything else. But overall, that class, I think, was the class that nobody knew they wanted, and then a lot of people were like, holy crap, I want to play this. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I realized we didn't actually do an introduction, so why don't we do those real quick? Sorry.
My name's Stephen Raddy McFarland. I'm a member of the design team, and now I'm the oldest member of the design team now that I kicked Sean off the cliff. No, I didn't kick Sean off the cliff.
It's politely he jumped. Yeah, he jumped. He fell.
Who's not the lead designer, of course, because Jason is way older than me.
That's not.
No, it's not true.
I'm Logan Bonner. I'm the second most senior member of the design team.
Except for the
former
lead.
Except for the whatever. We don't talk about it. Former developer.
I'm sitting right here. I'm Jason Bulmahn. I'm the lead designer. Yeah. You don't know who I am, right?
I'm Mark Sexter. I'm the third most senior member of the design team.
I'm still sitting right here. That's it. You're all fired. All right.
Jason is the senior most and youngest member of the design team now.
That is not.
So you might be sensing a divide, and this is the real reason for the divide, is Logan, Mark, and I all sit in the same office, and Jason sits in the office next door, and sometimes we just forget he's even there.
Yeah. So, by the way, I want you guys all to know our next book is going to be The Ultimate Commoner. It's going to be written by these three. The book is going to contain 57,000 commoner stat clauses.
Sneakerverse, we can do that.
That's fine. I will. All right.
It's also worth noting that because of timing and everything, and when Sean left, only half of us actually worked on this book.
Yeah.
Because Mark and I both started after it was already pretty much done.
But that's it. You're now responsible. All right.
Yes. All the bad things in the book.
No. Anything that went wrong with this book, including the screwed up cover, Sean's fault. He doesn't work here anymore. We get to blame everything on him.
But he is at the show. I ran into him downstairs, and if you see him, right, just go, Sean, it's a pleasure to meet you. Why did you screw up the logo on the cover?
Yeah, just when all of you see him, just ask him why he screwed up the logo on the cover of the advanced class guide. Please, do it for us.
And he'll probably come up with some...
He actually had, to be clear, he had nothing to do with it. It was a printer mess up. It's fine. It is what it is. Anyway, it's now a collectible. All right. So the next class in the book is the Brawler. The Brawler is a mix of the monk and the fighter. So if you always wanted to play, you're like, oh, the monk. I like beating people up. That sounds cool. You know what I don't care about? Mysticism. I just want to punch people with my fists until they stop moving. But a Brawler is your class.
Probably the one driving the band.
Yeah. White knuckled.
Driving gloves, startup knuckles.
So it's a full. It has a full BAB progression, so it progresses like a fighter. It gets a lot of the punch like a monk. But we trade out a lot of the mysticism for better abilities with combat maneuvers and more bonus feats. So the class is actually really relatively straightforward. If you want to.
The keystone ability to spontaneously gain a feat that you don't have is pretty complicated.
Yeah. So if you like feats and you like picking feats and you want to do that frequently, this is the class for you. So that's the Brawler in a nutshell. Next up is the Hunter. The Hunter is a blend of Druid and Ranger. And once again, it's kind of... Well, one of the things that we realized is that we didn't have any class in the game that really, we had two classes with animal companions, right? We got Druids, we have Rangers. They both like animal companions. But both of them can choose not to have an animal companion, right? It's not necessarily a signature feature of the class. Both of them also have a lot of other stuff going on. We said, well, why don't we make a class that actually, the animal companion is a key focus, right? And the two of them fight in tandem. So when the hunter picks a target and is like, that guy, let's murder him, the two of them can really tag team that monster very effectively. They get teamwork feats they get to share. They get special abilities like the animal companion at a certain level no longer provides any cover if you're making ranged attacks. And the big thing is the hunter and her animal companion can also share animal focus? Animal aspect.
Animal focus.
It's both.
It's both, yeah.
It's the one where you pick things.
There's an animal focus.
We don't know what Has anyone read this book? Could someone explain this?
I did a preview on these guys.
I edited that. I can explain it to you.
I'm reading. Yeah, it's animal focus.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said.
Yes. Although there's also an animal aspect spell.
Shut up. So animal focus allows you to pick an animal and you gain aspects of that animal. On your animal companion, it's always active. Is it always active on you?
No, you only get it for a short time unless you murder Fluffy. Then you get the other one.
Don't murder Fluffy. You want Fluffy around. But if Fluffy should happen to die, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but animal companions, they tend to get killed first. Right? When the GM wants to show that he means business, the animal companion dies first.
But sometimes just because other party members are hungry. Right?
Yeah.
Animal companions have the yummy food.
Yeah. Someone cast divine flavor on me. That is a very old joke, sir.
Yeah.
That is a very old joke. That's back like the dragon.
Like that makes it better.
No, it does. It aged. It's seasoned.
Right.
It's
like a
oh, forget it. All right.
It's like scotch.
So, yeah. No. All right. So the hunter is really kind of all about that. Fights in tandem. Next up is the investigator, Steven. This was when you developed.
Yep. So I love detective stories, Sherlock Holmes stories, but other detective stories as well. And I've always kind of wanted to play that class, and always ended up making a rogue because I don't play bards. There's nothing wrong with bards. I just don't like bards.
There's nothing wrong with bards.
James Jacobs plays one wicked bard. I'm always in awe, and I'm like, wow, that seems fun. I'm not going to do that, but I'm glad you did. And so delving back into the Sherlock Holmes fiction, I was all like, okay, so if I really wanted this class in the Pathfinder universe, what is it? And I'm like, well, Sherlock Holmes is a chemist. We have an alchemist. And he's a bit of a rogue too. He's got all the skills and everything else. And so I'm like, can we do this? And everybody said, yes, Stephen, let's do that. And he's also got inspiration, which makes him the ultimate skill monkey. He's got a pool of inspiration that he can boost up his skills with when he absolutely needs it. He makes concoctions. He can even get a mutagen later on if you take the right investigator talent. And in the beginning of the draft, we just had him do sneak attack. And one of the things that the playtest brought back was like, sneak attack works pretty well. We like it. But, you know, we've seen these great Sherlock Holmes things where he studies his opponent and, you know, and gets a little bit of a bonus and then does a knockout punch. And so instead we did stubby combat and stubby strike. Stubby combat is, you check out the guy, spend a little bit of time to do it, you get some bonuses to attack and damage, and then when you're ready, you get something akin to sneak attack dice on one attack. And that's to simulate that whole thing that, you know, you see Robert Downey Jr. do and other aspects of brawling detectives. And so, yeah, that was basically the class. And one of the joys that I've had is I've had a lot of people, you know, people come up and tell us what classes they like the best anyway, and it goes, you know, it all has to do with your play style. But I've had a lot of folks come up and said, thank you for the investigator. This is a class that I really wanted to play for a long time. I'm like, me too. And I'm usually the guy who plays, you know, real metal dudes, but I'm like, yeah, when I want to play the smartest guy in the room, I'm going to lean on this.
I'm going to skip the cheap joke about you being the smartest guy in the room. All right.
I said I'm playing the smartest guy.
That was the direction the joke was going to take. All right. So next up is the shaman. The shaman is a blend of witch and oracle. Although it's got a fairly heavy dash of druid thrown in as well. It's one of the only class in here that really kind of is aimed at 3, but most of it draws from the witch and the oracle. So the shaman is really all about spirits, and these spirits take various forms. You know, flame, stone, heavens. They're very similar to oracle mysteries. But for the shaman forms a particular bond with one of them. But at later levels can start talking to more than one. And these spirits give her hexes, they give her various other class features that plug in. Mostly hexes, there's a skill in there.
There's a spirit ability.
Yeah, there's a spirit ability and a couple other bits and pieces. There's like a spirit ability, a greater spirit ability, and a true spirit ability.
And then manifestation.
Yeah, and then the full manifestation. So the shaman has a companion as well, kind of a spirit animal that it talks to get its spells, but unlike the witch's familiar, the spells aren't actually stored in the familiar. She uses the spirit animal to commune with her spirit, because she is a divine caster and she doesn't have a list of spells known or anything like that. She can prepare whatever spells she wants every day. And then at higher levels, you start getting a wandering spirit, which allows you to kind of be like, oh, well, I care mostly about stone, you know, and that flavors my companion and flavors most of my class features and abilities. But at higher levels, you know, I know we're going to be facing some trolls, so today I'm going to commune with the spirit of flame as well, and start drawing some of those abilities in. So the shaman really is kind of all over the place on that. Like, they can really kind of change up the way that their class works each day. They get hexes, many of which are similar to witch hexes, but are less kind of malevolent. Some of them are a little bit more beneficial. The class also, in playtest, we had a lot of trouble with the spell list. We started out with, what did we start out with?
Cleric list,
then druid list, and we kind of were going all over the place trying to figure out what worked. And in the end, we just made it its own spell list. So now, in this book, it has its own unique spell list. That's pretty easy to intuit what should be in it and what shouldn't be in it if, you know, there are other sources of spells and you want to figure out what should go on the shaman list. In most cases, they're a little druidy, a little, hexy. I mean, if you think about the concept of a shaman, it comes together pretty quickly, right? this is a class that we've always kind of had to crib before, right? You know, it's like, the orc shaman. Well, what is he? Is he a cleric? Is he a druid? What is he? And now he can just be a shaman if that's what you want. So that's the shaman. The shaman's pretty exciting. Next up is the Skald.
Another metal class.
This was one of the shamans.
Yeah, I can take it.
Yeah, why don't you
I
take
did
that?
the
Yeah, go ahead.
preview.
Yeah.
Alright, so the Skull is definitely another metal class.
We used to call it the barbarian.
Yeah.
And there is good reason for that. So when you think about your bard, they buff up their team, they have a lot of support spells, they have some skills, and they generally maybe like this troubadour with like a feather in his cap and a flute or something like that. The Skull is a flute. That's what you get bard.
No, I know, but who's going to go adventuring with a flute? Hey, it's a horrible dragon.
Well, you can intimidate the dragon to death.
It could be Jeff.
Alright, well, so if you are the Skald, however, then the Skald is sort of your metal bard. The Skald is a bard who, instead of giving you like, oh, you can do it, man, you're going to be great, and putting up your courage, the Skald throws the entire party into a berserk frenzy. Full of rage powers. It's basically a barbarian rage. In the initial conception, you had to either take it or not, and then you just kept raging, and at the end you were fatigued. But as it turned out, this didn't work very well because a lot of characters would not want to always be in rage and then become fatigued.
The wizard in the party's like, no thanks.
But now, you can accept the rage on a round-to-round basis, which means that even the wizard, if he was had around positioning and the rage powers were like superstitious or something that gives passive buffs, might be willing to accept it temporarily. And the fighters are just like, hell yeah! Because they're constantly getting all the rage powers and getting the benefits of rage. So other than that, the Skald has a lot of the same powers as the bard, such as versatile performance. They got a bunch of new songs in the final book, like the Song of the Fallen, where, you know what's really inconvenient when you're a support character and like the other people are doing a ton of damage and they just kill them and then you don't have anyone to support. That sucks. Well, with this spell, you can just bring them back. It does cost 1 round per character that was dead per round. So if like you're in a 6-person party and they're all dead and they're only alive by virtue of your song, you spend 5 rounds each round. You're going to run out really fast, but it's still better than having them on the floor dead.
There's one of those powers that you're glad when you have it, but you really hope you never have to use it.
Yeah. Their other cool thing is spell kenning, because if you think of Skald, you sometimes think of the guy who's telling the story of Beowulf, and it's like, this is Beowulf, Slayer of Grendel, Savior of Herod, and then like all of these long like honorific noun phrases that come after that. Well, this guy can give a really long kenning, and when he does that, it takes a really long time to cast, but it allows him to use one of his spell slots to pick a spell he didn't have on his spells done. That could even be off the wizard or the cleric spell list. So he's got this only a few times per day, but if he's willing to spend the extra time to go off on this really long kenning about like a particular topic, he can pull in that spell that's just the one you need right there. And that is the Skald.
So after that is the Slayer, and now we're back to even more metal. Like I said, this is like the 80s rock band book. So the Slayer takes the Rogue, who's all about disabling devices and evading fireballs and, you know, backstabbing people, you know, sneak attack, and blends it with the Ranger, who's all about animals and nature and, you know, hunting down hated foes, tracking through the wilderness. It takes those two classes, it brings them together, and where they overlap, if you think of them like a Venn diagram, they overlap in an area where it's like, oh, well, you like to sneak attack, and you like to hunt down hated foes. Okay, well, the rest of that stuff, nah, who cares about that? Let's just be all about murder. So the Slayer is literally he's just murder. It's like, oh, you like trees? That's nice. Can I kill a tree? Oh, a trap. I will kill it. So The Slayer, his entire shtick is just, I pick targets and I will murder them. The very first thing they kind of get is the ability to study targets, right? So, unlike a ranger who has, I hate orcs, they burned down my village when I was a child. The Slayer's like, I hate that guy. 'Cause he's they don't care about, they can pick new targets. So it's not, they get basically like half of the bonuses of favored enemy, but they get to pick when they do it, right? It's like, that guy, I hate that guy. I hate Barry. For those of you in our earlier seminar, screw that guy. That's kind of their first kind of main ability. And then later on they start picking up sneak attack. Now they don't get sneak attack at the same rate as a rogue, but they do start getting it. And when you combine that in with the studied target, you end up with the sort of situation where it's like, oh, I'm getting bonuses to hit you and bonuses to damage. In addition, the class does get some tracking ability, right? Because what's good, if you can't go, I'm going to kill that guy. Where'd he go? I don't know. He ain't right in front of me. I'll be over here. Somebody let me know when Barry shows up. I'll murder the hell out of him. And then, in addition, they get an ability called Slayer Talents. Slayer Talents are mainly drawn from the rogue talent list. As a matter of fact, most of their entire list is just like this rogue talent, this rogue talent, this rogue talent, from all these different books. But in addition, they have a number of Slayer Talents that are all their own. And at 10th level, just like the rogue, they get access to advanced Slayer Talents, such as Assassinate. This is this guy very well could be evil, but he doesn't have to be, and he has the ability to study someone for 3 rounds and then end with that. So when you're dealing with a high-level Slayer and he's sitting there like this for about 20 seconds, at about second 15 or so, you should probably leave. Peace out.
He can't track you.
Yeah, but he can follow you now. So if you get out the door, that doesn't necessarily mean you are safe. That's pretty much the Slayer. He gets some of the other, he gets Quarry and things like that too. Basically, we took all the things in both classes that were about murder and just smushed them together. The class wrote itself. It was like, is that about murder? Yes, it goes in. Is that about murder? No, that's about trees. Oh wait, they can get Woodland Stride. No.
They can also get trap fighting if they want.
You can spend some of your you can spend some talents getting some non-murder abilities. I mean, if that's your thing.
But you have to get the murder abilities.
Yeah.
That's non-negotiable.
All right. Next up is the guy who buckles Swash. Steven?
So the Swashbuckler, we knew we wanted to be a mix of kind of the gunslinger without the guns, strangely enough, and although you could get guns later on, and the fighter. We wanted a more dynamic draw upon this pool of sort of combat inspiration like the gunslinger does, or at least we thought about that. And so it was really hard because you try to fuse those classes, and if anybody remembers about gunslinger development back in Ultimate Combat, at first the gunslinger was going to be an alternate class for the fighter. And so it's already got a good amount of fighter in there. So one of the first things we did is like, here's a swashbuckler that's more fightery, and here's a swashbuckler that relies more on that gunslinger chassis. And we immediately said, oh yeah, we want panache instead of grit, but it works the same, and it fuels your ability to get out of jams or do very cool things in combat, or leap over things, or climb a wall really quickly.
Swing from a chandelier. Swing from a chandelier.
Of course, right? Or take out your dagger and go down a sail. Right, all of the things that
I saw that on Mythbusters. That was never one.
When they start doing Mythbusters for Pathfinder, we'll talk. But all the stuff you see Errol Flynn do, or the stuff in the Princess Bride. Right. I mean, just that kind of fun, low armor, very light weapon badass who has charming wit and can get out of jams really quick. So. And it was one of those things. So again, you put out the work, and you're like, well, there's been swashbuckler classes in other games before, and they really haven't fit. And James Jacobs, our creative director, was really interested in making sure that this class is something he wanted to play as well. It's a class that he really wanted. And back to age myself in the Living City days of Dungeons and Dragons, I played a paladin swashbuckler that used the kids in 2nd edition. It was a terrible, terrible character. As far as if you were looking at the mechanics and how effective he was in combat, but wow, he was fun to play, and everybody liked it when he was in the group. And so I wanted to capture all of that, and James did too, and we all did, and put it out there, and people were like, oh, this is pretty cool, right? We had to switch some things up with exactly how he was dealing his damage. A lot of the deeds that we put on needed some tweaking as we went forward. But again, it was one of those classes that people really latched onto. It was like, yep, this feels like a swashbuckler. I can go out and do all the things that I see in movies and I've got floating around in my head. And it's worked out pretty well.
Cool. So the last class is the War Priest, as we mentioned very early on. The War Priest has gone through a fair amount of revisions from its initial playtest version, but it's settled down into a nice form. The War Priest has kind of a lot of things going for him. He's a 6th level divine spellcaster. He has the same attack progression as a cleric, but when wielding his sacred weapon, and generally speaking that's the weapon of his deity, but he can also designate other weapons as sacred, he deals scaling increased damage with said weapon, right? So if your god's sacred weapon is a dagger, it's kind of hard to make it effective. I'm a war priest with this dagger, and everybody's like, okay, good luck with that, buddy. But if he's 11th level, that dagger does a D10, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, that really hurt. What the hell? He gets that ability, and it obviously it doesn't override it if the weapon naturally does more damage, right? So it's not like, oh, I have a longsword, but according to this, it only does a D6. What the hell's wrong with my longsword? You take the higher of the two. And instead of domains, he gets something called blessings. And blessings are generally quick little abilities he can pop off. He can use his blessings a total number of times per day. He doesn't have to keep track of each one individually. And the blessings give you, they're all like domains in that they give you, some sort of special ability. But these are much more focused on combat and fighting. The cleric ones tend to be more focused on spellcasting and kind of utility. The War Priest is like, no, I'm taking the powers of my god and using it to punch you in the face. In addition to that, the big thing the class gets is Fervor. And Fervor is a scaling ability, kind of like how Lay on Hands scales up. It goes up in power and ability as you do, and you can use it to heal yourself, right, or heal others. But the big thing you can also spend on is you can spend it to swift cast spells that target you. Working with not Shocking Grasp, because he works off the cleric list, and they don't get Shocking Grasp.
Produce flame strike.
Yeah, you can flame strike yourself. No, yay, flame strike. But even at low levels, right? Divine favor. Shield of Faith, at higher levels, things like Righteous Might and everything, you can just pop those on you at the start of the fight, and they're swift action, so you can still take your full turn. That was part of the reason why we moved the class away. The Sacred Weapon also used to allow your Sacred Weapon to attack at a full BAB like fire. We actually pulled that back because we realized the class was too good with it, to be honest. When you could swift cast those spells on yourself as well, many of those spells were not designed for a character that works at a full BAB progression, and because of it, your attack bonuses would scale out of control, and you would basically just be a monster. Like all of our protection those numbers went up to the roof. But to make up for that, we also removed this class. Used to have a lot of dependency on wisdom and charisma. And, well, you're a war priest, so you probably need strength and con. So we stripped charisma totally out of it. The word charisma no longer appears in this class anywhere. I did a search, and it was like, is the word charisma gone? It is. Now all of their abilities are based off wisdom instead of charisma. To kind of make the class a little tighter and let it function a little better. Spread your ability scores all around. So that's the war priest. The rest of this book, naturally, is like many of our other books. We have a very large chapter on archetypes. Each one of the new classes gets 4 pages of archetypes. All of the existing classes get 1 page of archetypes. Many of the archetypes for the existing classes allow them to play better to play with the mechanics from the new hybrid classes. So there's a wizard archetype, for example, that gives you an Arcanist reservoir, like an Arcanist. But you're still mostly a wizard. There's some other ones floating around in here that basically let you toy around with the abilities of some of these new hybrid classes without having to go full hog on it. After that, there's a chapter on feats. As you would expect, many of the feats in here are here to support the brand new classes. But there's a wide variety of feats that characters of any class can take and allow them to kind of play around with some of the new stuff in this book. But things like extra fervor and feats like that we need to make sure that the class, if you want to be, I want to be really good at X or Y or whatever thing from your new class, you need to make sure that you have those feats available. Next up is a chapter of spells. This is here to round out the spell list. Many of the spells appear on the spell list of multiple classes. So once again, if you're not playing one of these 10 classes, there's still plenty in this book for you. There's a section on gear and magic items. Everything else in this book is really here to kind of flesh out and fully support the 10 new classes. Because without that kind of support, right, these classes are latecomers to the game, and we don't want them to have no options compared to, say, the alchemist. But once again, many of these useful by anybody. And the book rounds out with a chapter, a relatively short chapter, but a kind of a treatise on our process for designing classes and kind of what we go through to design classes. It's not a system for designing classes. That would take up the whole book. It's really just more of kind of a talk about our philosophy behind designing classes, what process we go through, so that you, when you're at home and you want to tinker with the class or you want to make something new and make something different for your game because you need it, the story dictates that you need, a character that we don't have, you at least have some guidelines to kind of help you along the way. And we do that. There's also a discussion in there on how we do prestige classes and how we do archetypes as well. So that kind of sums up the advanced class guide. We still got about 10 minutes here before we got to wrap, so I'm going to open it up to questions if anybody has any. And I'll just call on you. You were first.
So how do existing archetypes, like say the martial artist, the monk versus the brawler, would both give up the mysticism to do the punchy fist thing?
Yeah.
How do the existing archetypes inform the making of these new classes? Are you trying to step around? Or?
Well, in some cases we just said, that archetype didn't do it enough. Like, for example, there already is a swashbuckler archetype, right? It's for the rogue. It's in the advanced class guide, and it barely scratches the surface on what a swashbuckler needs to be. So in some cases, we just went, yeah, we tried that with an archetype. It didn't quite do what we needed it to do. Let's do it right. And that may have invalidated some of these archetypes slightly, right? To the point that if you really wanted that concept, you now have a full class to explore it. But that said, for some people, it might just be just enough of that concept that it does what they need it to do. So it's really on a case-by-case basis, but, in some cases we said, okay, well, we can step around that. In other cases, we were like, yeah, we'll just do what we need to do.
What distinguishes the need for a new class as opposed to implementing a suite of feats and skills and such to have this idea?
So, generally speaking, whenever we're looking at a class, there's a lot of different decisions that have to be made. The first and the biggest one is, does it have its own conceptual niche? Does it have its own mechanical niche? Does the class have a place to live, both conceptually and rules-wise? And sometimes the answer to that is no, right? It's like, oh, that's a really cool concept. Let me step back to the ninja. The ninja really wants to be mostly a rogue, right? He wants to sneak around, he wants to stab you in the dark. He's mostly a rogue. So while the ninja got a full class write-up, because it's a cool concept that we wanted people to play ninjas, it's still technically listed as an alternate class, but what that basically means is that it's a fully blown out archetype. Which means if you take levels in ninja, you can't take levels in rogue. You get one or the other, and that's it. So that's the sort of thing where conceptually it had its own niche. Like ninja, when you say ninja, that's a thing. People know what that is. When you say rogue, that's a thing. Those aren't necessarily the same. But mechanically, they were very similar. So we kind of went with that direction. So when it comes to a new class, we ask ourselves those questions. And we're like, okay, is this something we need? Does it fill a hole that we think exists? In the case of many of these classes, it was like, does this fill a hole that multi-classing can't really address very well? Because you end up with a class that's kind of not good at either of the things it wants to be. We've tried to address that in the past with prestige classes. I don't really feel like those have been ultimately successful. But that's generally part of our process of slotting, picking an idea, going, is this idea worth it? And then figuring out where it needs to live. Is it an archetype? Is it a prestige class? Is it a full class? What is it? And things will move around on those lists. And with this one, those were the things I was on. And then a couple of them actually sunk down and became archetypes instead.
I know that this went back and forth in the playtest, but do the classes count as their parent classes when qualifying for things?
So the answer to that is no. However, many of them have classes. The question was, do the classes count towards, as their parent classes, when do they count towards qualifying for prestige classes or anything like that? The answer is generally no. However, many of them have the features that will allow you to qualify anyway, right? The only place where that gets tricky is like the War Priest says, for the terms of his bonus feats, he counts as a fighter of his level. So he does qualify. He has special language saying that.
With full base attack bonus.
Yeah, with full BAB.
So,
but only for the purposes of qualifying for feats.
Yeah.
There was a rule during the playtest that stated that you couldn't take levels in your parent classes. Because this is drawn from both of them, and you'd be duplicating a bunch of abilities. We killed that for the final level. We said that it wasn't worth it. The classes are different enough, and if you really want to take fighter and war priest levels to be, if cleric is here, fighter is here, and war priest is in the middle of them, and you want to be in the first quintile instead, you can do that by taking levels of fighter as well. You're going to get some duplicate abilities, and then they may or may not stack, right, depending on the abilities. But yeah, that's kind of.
There are also a few things like panache points where they count as grit for a lot of feats and things, so they work with
some of them. Yeah, some of them have specific exceptions to make them work, but as a general rule. Factor?
You mentioned some of the in the brainstorming classes that did not make it into this book. Can you share with us any of those ideas and how likely are we to see them in future products?
What ones ended up on the cutting room floor? God, it's been so long now.
The funny thing about it is a lot of those we didn't really name, right? We looked at
it just started as class combinations, yeah.
And so like, hey, can we find a good story niche for this, right? Is there something in history or fiction or literature and that we know people want to play? So yeah, we didn't name them at that point, right? It's kind of like,
I did put a joke one on the list, though. I remember I put a Summoner Paladin.
Yeah.
Because that seems like it would work.
Right.
Just got this weird looking horse.
It's possible.
It's got 2 butts. Why does it have 2 butts? That joke would have much better in this seminar. All right.
Who do we thank for the Shield Champion Brawler archetype?
Not Sean. Never thank Sean for anything. No,
it was a freelancer.
I think it was a freelancer who created that, but I think we ordered it.
I want to say it was Jesse Bennett, but I might be mistaken about it.
Yeah, it's been a while. You have to understand that the last time we touched this book was in February? Yeah. It's been a while. So some of that stuff starts to slip away.
I feel like I saw a post where James Groves said that.
It might have been Jim Groves. Yeah, it's one of the awesome J guys we got. So.
Not including Jason.
I said
Bitches. Ultimate Commoners coming soon.
Does the book have any recommendations on if you want to add the war priest here? So you cut me Galarian tabs.
So this is the rules line, yeah. So generally no. However, there is a book coming out called Advanced Class Guide Origins, which takes these classes and nativises them to our setting. And kind of says,
It's always been a problem I've had with new classes where all these oracles have been around for years and years and years.
yeah.
Where have they been?
So October, Player Companion Lion, and it's exactly what you just said.
We generally try to assume that all of the classes that have come out since the core rule book are less common. They're not rare necessarily, but they're just...
Except summoners.
Yeah, summoners are very rare. Trading horses with 2 bucks. All right. Anybody else got any questions? Almost out of time anyway. Anybody? Going once? Going twice? You get a third question.
Do we get figs for these?
Do we get figs? Yes, of course. Yeah.
We already have the metal minis.
Yeah, some of the metal minis, and they're already painted. You can see them down the booth.
I think it's half of the comics.
And I'm sure it would make sense that you would see these in the WizKids line as well. You generally try to make sure all of our comics have good, high quality things for them. So, thank you for attending, everybody. I hope you guys had a good time.